Hey, Larkin Rose here. Two orders of business before I get into ranting at you. One is that we have two Jones Plantation posters signed by the director and myself left over after filling the perks for the poster thing. So I'm going to auction them off here. The two highest bidders in the comments section by 11 o'clock tonight, Arizona time, will get the remaining two signed posters that we have. Second order of business, we now are in a partnership with Advocates for Self-Government, which is asg.stream as far as showing the movie. So you can go there and check that out. And now on to ranting at you. People suck at being objective about their situation. As a general rule, whatever we're accustomed to, whatever we're familiar with, we think that's more or less what should be. Now, we can bicker about little details here and there and want to tinker with the nitpicky little things, but when it comes to the foundational essence of how society works, people have done a really bad job historically and today of actually stepping back and saying, is this okay? Now, luckily for those of us living here and now, a lot of progress has happened. It used to be that if somebody looks different than you and sounds different than you and they have a tribe over there, you go kill them, you take their stuff. That's just how it is. That's how the world works. That's perfectly okay. That's what everybody should do. That's what we expect everyone to do. And it wasn't quite everybody, but that has been a lot of human history for a lot of the planet for a lot of time. And only relatively recently have the radical extremists said, maybe you shouldn't just kill people and take their stuff because they're from a different tribe or look different or from a different country or whatever. Some people still haven't all the way learned that lesson, but most of us have. One of the most disturbing examples of what I'm talking about came up when I was doing my video series about Frederick Douglass and his firsthand account of being a slave, being owned by other people. And his description, and his is certainly not the only one, but his description of how the slaves accepted their lot in life for the most part. They thought, well, that's what, we're rightfully owned by that person. We don't like it much, but hey, that's how it is. He bought us fair and square, and now we're his property. To the point that, as I've said a zillion times before, a bunch of them viewed it as stealing if they were to run away. Hey, you're stealing yourself from the master who rightfully owns you. To us today, here and now, I'll speak for myself, I expect this is true of most people, it's really damn hard to imagine thinking that I'm supposed to be somebody else's property, that they have the right to dominate me and control me and rob me and force me to work for them without pay. It's really hard for me to imagine thinking, well, yeah, that's how it is. That's legitimate. It's legal, which it was, by the way. But they did because that's all they knew and they were surrounded by. Now, all of them didn't. And Frederick Douglass is a shining example of somebody whose brain slowly but surely escaped the indoctrination and figured out this isn't at all okay. And it isn't just a matter of we want a nicer master, it's I own myself. And coming to that realization as a slave, that's really damn impressive to me. I can't even relate to or imagine the level of indoctrination it would take to make somebody think that they were supposed to be somebody else's property. And I can't imagine how much mental and philosophical fortitude it would take to crawl your way out of that kind of just soul-crushing indoctrination. But he did, and he wasn't the only one, thankfully. But when people look at their current situation, there are a lot of things that happen that are not at all okay, objectively speaking. If you look in terms of principles, they're not okay. Now, there are fewer and fewer of those in a lot of places. In some places in the world, it's still, well, if you're a woman, your husband owns you, and you can be, stoned to death if he, if he decides he doesn't want you or something, just horrendous garbage. And people who grow up in that culture, the more they get exposed to people going, that's insane, like run away. If you want to run away from that crap, you can come over here. At least they have competing ideas. But if you didn't grow up with competing ideas, all you've ever heard is, this is how things are. Then you're going to think that's how things are. And only if you're in that weirdo, freak, kook minority that's able to back up and say, I know this is how things are. I know this is how everybody seems to think things have to be, but I think they're wrong. Unless you're one of those people, most people just go along with it. And the concept of government is a shining example of that. If you look at it objectively, it's ridiculous, insane, and evil. There's no other way to put it. It is as ridiculous as slavery. In fact, in a bunch of ways, it is fundamentally the same as slavery. Do you, person who's watching this video, do you really and truly believe that those politicians who got elected into office, or the bureaucrats who got appointed, or whatever, that they actually have the moral right to take as much of your paycheck as they want, because they decide the tax rates, to control as many aspects of your life as they want, and to send men with guns to punish you if you disobey, and to basically treat you like their property? Now, you might say, well, they let me keep most of what I earn. Okay, that's not the question. Like, if a slave master said, I only whip my slaves and force them to work 2 days out of the week. Okay, slavery is still completely wrong. Like, that doesn't change the principle. The fact that you may be a relatively nicer master doesn't mean you're not an evil psycho, and it doesn't mean the institution is completely evil and insane. So, what it boils down to is, do you actually think that a ruling class that gets to decide how much of what you earn they will let you keep? Because that's what they're doing when they decide tax rates and impose taxes on all sorts of... They're deciding what to let you keep. Do you actually think, if you step back, try to step outside of your indoctrination and what everybody knows and what of course is necessary and justified and blah, 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 blah. Do you really think there are other human beings in the world who have the right to demand money from you? And it doesn't matter if it's for things you want or not. Like, you can whine about that after the fact. They don't care. They spend it on whatever they want. They have the right to take as much as they want and let you keep only as much as they decide to let you keep by way of legislation. If you think about that objectively, does that sound sane? Does that sound legitimate? Now, that describes every government in the world, because every government taxes, which means they rob people. Now, even if they don't do an income tax, we're only going to do an excise tax if you do certain things. It's like carjackers saying, we don't just steal everybody's cars. It's just in these parts of town where if you drive there, then we'll steal your car. Well, does that make them good people? No. Does that make the theft legitimate in those parts of town? No. Well, what if they say, well, you didn't have to go there. You could have just not come to this part of town. Just like some people say, well, excise taxes, if you don't want to pay an excise tax on like alcohol or firearms, just don't engage and don't make those things. Don't engage in that industry. Okay, so they get to just randomly decide which professions they're going to forcibly rob. And of course, now we have way more than that in income taxes and sales taxes and all sorts of things that are way harder to avoid anyway. But the fact that, yeah, you could avoid the scary part of town and you could avoid distilling whiskey and then you won't be robbed by that particular tax, does that make it okay? Is that the standard? If you went to your neighbors and say, look, I'm going to rob you of all your money and beat the hell out of you, but only if I catch you wearing purple shoes. Are you going to say, oh, well, that's fine. All I have to do is not wear purple shoes. Or you're going to say, you're a psycho. I don't wear purple shoes, but you're still a psycho. This still isn't okay. And if you attack somebody, I hope they beat the crap out of you or shoot you or something to stop you from being a violent psycho. So why is it that when it comes to government, people accept the utterly insane notion that other human beings, in fact, pretty much the worst human beings in the world, have the right to decide how much of what you produce they will let you keep, because that is a literal description of taxation. Now, what most people's brains are going to do when I say that is fall back on the excuses that they were taught to memorize and parrot. Well, without government, it would be chaos. We'd all be killing and eating each other. Okay, does that change morality? If the carjacker said, well, I only rob you in these parts of town, you say, that's bad. Well, if I wasn't robbing your cars, we'd be killing and eating each other. Like, would that be a rational response? Would you buy that as an excuse for his violence? Or would you say, okay, now you're just throwing out bonkers propaganda. You still don't have the right to rob me. The mental inertia that comes from so many people being indoctrinated into the cult of statism makes it so that even very simple explanations of obvious principles, like those people over there shouldn't get to just steal as much as they want from what you produce. Most people have a hard time hearing that because it goes against their indoctrination and it goes against what everybody around them believes, for the most part. Thankfully, that's starting to change. Trying to actually be objective is a huge challenge, and most people never even try. To them, it's comfortable fitting in with the people around them. This was true in slave days, too. The slave who was surrounded by other slaves who kept their heads down and worked hard and did as they were told, it isn't just that he might get whipped and bad things might happen to him if he gets uppity or fights back or runs away. It's that for him to do those things, he has to go against the opinions and the viewpoints and the assumptions of all his fellow victims. And his fellow victims will be the first ones to get mad at him if he doesn't go along with whatever they want. And lots of voluntarists listening to this can totally relate. Because when we go tell people, I don't want you robbed for anything. I don't want you forced to support anything. I'm not voting for a guy to make you fund this and that and the other thing. I want you to be able to spend your money without coercion from anybody ever. And the response we get from the people we're trying to pitch freedom to is, that'll never work. It'll be chaos. It'll be mayhem. Who will pick the cotton? Oh, sorry. Fell back into the slavery one. That is what we're up against. And I totally understand why a lot of voluntarists and anarchists get very frustrated. Because it's like, I'm trying to tell people they shouldn't be victimized and they're telling me they should. Well, that's exactly what Frederick Douglass went through. I'm not sure this is okay. Shut up. Who are you? You rebel, radical, fringe kook with your weird ideas. You're just going to get in trouble. Stop that reading and stuff. This is what we're up against. We're not just up against a few tyrannical psychos who will punish us. We're up against a society of victims who believe so much in their own victimization that they will resent anybody who stands up and says, I don't think I should be victimized. I don't even think any of you should be victimized either. And they'll usually get mad at the person saying that. Or say, well, that would be nice, but it's utopian. And because we need this, because there'd be chaos and mayhem. And of course it's legitimate, because we get to vote, and there's constitutions, and there's all these weird rituals they do. So it must be okay for them to steal as much as they want from us. And all we can do is beg to them to please change their mind about how much they're going to let us keep. We have to beg the carjacker, well, yeah, I know I drove through that part of town, but will you please give me permission to keep my own car? Is that really necessary? If the victims outnumber and outgun the victimizers, why don't you just say, no, you're not taking my car. Even though I drove into this part of town, still not taking my stinking car. Get out of here. That is the only rational, moral, sane response. But if you suggest that to most people indoctrinated into the cult of statism, you suggest not only disobedience, but maybe even resisting the legalized thuggery and theft and extortion and evil crap that the authoritarian monstrosities always do, they will most likely view you as the scary enemy. Oh, you're a terrorist. because you don't want to be victimized even by people with badges and people in special offices who call themselves lawmakers. So sadly, we're up against a slightly different version of what Frederick Douglass was up against, which is people who are so reluctant to objectively reconsider their situation that they would rather attack anybody who says, I want you to be free. You should be free. You have the right to be free. They would rather attack the people saying that than stop bowing to the God-called government. And it's sad to watch. All right, as a reminder, top 2 bids get the last 2 signed by me and the Andrew Treglia, the director of the film, Jones Plantation posters. Top 2 bids in the comments below by, what did I say? 11 o'clock tonight, Arizona time. And also, wanted to announce again, our partnership with ASG.stream, that's Advocates for Self-Government. They have their platform which focuses very heavily on pro-freedom messages, and guess whether Jones Plantation fits in that category. And of course, as always, if you want to go see the movie on our site, jonesplantationfilm.com. Yeehaw. So for those of you reluctant to question the situation you're in, please take a step back and try to be a little bit objective. And for those of you trying to spread those ideas to a society that mostly hates you for telling them that you think they should be free, keep trying anyway, because the numbers are shifting and people are waking up. And pretty soon, all of society will look back on statism the same way we now look back on slavery and say, why the hell did we ever think that was legitimate? So have a swell day either way.